Well, hey there team, and welcome back to the channel. Today I would like to show you a game that I've been playing called Dreadlands. Now this is going to be a really tough one. I'm very fence-city about it. You can feel it, you can hear it in my voice. Look, let's get into it, let's unpack, but this isn't getting my absolute glowing recommendation, but also bear in mind that if I thought a game was bad, being that I'm a soft critic and I just don't like to go hard on criticism, I wouldn't give it the platform. I wouldn't give it my time of day. So there is still something cool here. There's still something good here, and I'm hoping to concede that maybe it's me and not so much the game. So this is probably the hardest criticism that you'll ever kind of see from me, which is to say fairly gentle criticism, because if we did go into the path of a bad game, I just wouldn't show it to you, because I don't see the point in giving publicity to bad games. So Dreadlands, we'll get the basics out of the way. It's developed by Black Fox Studios, seems to be their first outing, and it's published by Fat Shark, which people will probably know as the developer of the Vermintide games. So very strange. So this is different, and instead of developing, I don't know, maybe they're using the capital that they made from the success of Vermintide, which was no small success, that was a big blowout. Great games, by the way. To then start publishing, and this looks like maybe their first entry. It doesn't look like it's really hit it off as far as, because I'm doing this after release. I think it's been out for a bit of a month, perhaps. And it's gone quite under the radar, basically. So Dreadlands, this is an XCOM style, you know the ones, the turn-based combat, top-down, isometric sort of thing. This, at first, got me really excited when I started playing it, because this is the closest thing that I've ever played to a really faithful translation of the tabletop Mordheim or Necromunda style. This definitely leans more Necromunda, and funny, Necromunda wasn't really my wheelhouse. I played a tiny bit of it, but more Mordheim. But to be perfectly honest, like most things in 40k and all that around that time, they were just two different versions. One's medieval and one's in the future sort of thing. So this is very Necromunda-y, and it's got all the trappings and that designs from the tabletop. More so than like the Mordheim game that was released. I was playing it recently just to sort of taste test. This feels a lot more faithful to the tabletop originally. So if you are like me, an absolute diehard Mordheim fan, which I am, I love it, it's one of my favourite games ever, that tabletop, then you might find something in here. But again, like I said, I'm still pretty lukewarm on this game, even though I'm one of the biggest Mordheim fans rocking around. I think a part of it is that time changes our perspectives. The nostalgia's that for a reason. There's plenty of times you go back to older things and they don't hold up. So even though I love Mordheim, if you said, hey, let's play it on the tabletop and go for it now, there's a good chance that I might not like it, because modern gaming space has changed. So the nostalgia is good in the memory capacity, but I'm also perfectly aware that we evolve and we iterate and we change. So perhaps there's the issue, because it does seem to have taken some actual tabletop mechanics onto here. The fights can be sort of short and punchy and decisive. There's a mixture of sort of shooting your guns and doing melee as well. And like a tabletop Warhammer type game, as soon as your dudes are tied up in melee, it's sort of a one-way ticket. So you can just keep piling more guys in. Problem is that your dudes don't really have abilities or anything like that. It's pretty much I hit, you hit, and their stat sheet is dictated by not much more than their equipment, which is very sparse. The equipment economy in this game is so, like, not brutal in the same way as Stone Shard, because, like, there is actually quite a robust economy in Stone Shard, but you don't get a lot of money for what you sell, so you have to grind a bit. In this, it's more that it's just barren. There's not a lot of drops. There's not a lot of money. There's not a lot of anything, to be honest. And so, even buying a new dude into your warband for like $90 of the game currency, and you're barely getting a couple of bucks to progress from fight to fight. So there is that grind, but there's no reward loop So I have a little bit of issue with that. So the reason I mentioned that is because the equipment's the only thing that really would augment your combat prowess in melee, and to be honest, you're not getting much equipment. So it becomes a little bit rinse and repeat, stack the dudes in, fight. Unless you do shooting, the shooting seems to be... I think it's actually quite heavily biased in the background. A lot of people don't realise that, like, I'm not trying to speak for game design, but you hear it come up quite often that, like, you know, your XCOM type 80% to hit and all that, it's never really 80%. It's actually higher. Because if they really gave you true 80% or true numbers, it'd be even more brutal than what you perceive. And people already complain so much about how XCOM is unfair with the dice rolls. I can't believe I missed that 95%. When the truth is, quite often, in the background, those numbers are already stacked in your favour anyway. So imagine if they gave you the real percentages. The percentages in the shooting seem stacked even harder. I'm hitting 40% shots all the time, non-stop. It really does seem favourable. And the bullets, they've obviously built in gameplay mechanics, which at first I thought were really clever. So you get 2 actions per turn, which is sort of standard fare for your XCOM type game. And so you can shoot twice. There's an ammo component and a reload component, and ammo is actually quite sparse. But if you fire twice, there's a very significant chance that your gun will jam. And this is an issue that carries out past the battle. So you can jam the dude's gun that needs to be fixed in the sort of meta progression in the overworld. I thought that was really clever. I sort of came to realise that I think it's a mechanic because the way that this game is built, and with their percentages and such, it's brutally overpowered, some of these weapons, and even with that jam risk, it's worth it. It's worth just banging on your guns until you run out of ammo, because the amount of damage, the hit rate that they do, and you're only versing a couple of blokes at a time, just like your warband, you can just sit them down so quickly and so easily. So, like, it's, the pace of a fight seems really off. I don't know how else to describe it. I'm not saying that it's necessarily short, because I feel like they do kind of drag on. The controls are a bit clunky and unwieldy. So it's like spacebar to cycle your dudes, tab to cycle enemies that they could target, but there's no real, like, hotkey to go back to your character once you're already tab targeting. And then it focuses on the dude that you're looking at, but from the isometric, so not like an over-the-shoulder aim that you might be familiar with from an XCOM. But yeah, so it just shifts the overhead camera to them across the battlefield, because they can shoot quite far. And the best way to get the camera back is just to cycle to your next dude. It's very strange. I feel like I'm bashing on it. I'm not trying to. I'm highlighting a few issues that I'm all for iterating on the formula and trying something new. It's the only way that we grow. It's like the built-in mutation of the evolution of a genre. It's important that people try new things, so I applaud it for that. But sometimes there's a reason it's industry standard, and there's a reason that the best XCOM type games almost clone XCOM entirely. I mean, look at Phoenix Point. Phoenix Point is made by Julian Gollop, like the guy who made XCOM originally. But the modern iteration of XCOM is just so good and so associated with that brand, they had to lift that and do that on the Phoenix Point spin-off. So while Phoenix Point is supposed to be like a true spiritual successor to the original XCOM, and it definitely has some more elements that were left out in the recent versions, they still had to take on what XCOM 2 is set as the bar and put that into the formula. It was a smart move. So there are some interesting choices in here, and I don't think they really land, which is such a shame, because parts of this game feel great. The most important thing to sort of stress, sadly, for all of those errors, it probably could have been overlooked if this game had, like, a soul. Sounds really rough to go after this thing, but that's sort of the main big issue that I have with it. At first glance, you're like, okay, we've got post-apocalypse, all these dudes in gas masks, it's interesting. Unfortunately, like, it kind of makes them all sort of, I really hate to use the word bland, but I think it's the correct term. All the characters are sort of homogenized by these masks. They don't have voice lines so much as when they interact, they just have a muffled thing. And all this sort of walks it towards the characters having no identity from one another at all. I can't remember any of the names of any of my guys. And that's kind of the real heart of these sort of games, of your XCOMs, of your Phoenix Points. The idea that you could have this one dude that just chads up and he kills a whole bunch of guys and saves the day and all that, and you remember him, and he gets a nickname, and it has character, and a lot of this has got to do with art style. Like the palette in this is very basic, very I guess pastel-y sort of thing, and the music is really understated. I think they've got like one track on loop, and it is sort of that, you know, hick southern low end, really mellow background sort of typical post-apocalyptic sort of tune, but it has like no emotion, no nothing. It is ambient, so like I suppose it's a cool ambient sound, but that's all that it sort of is. It sounds like I'm bashing on this. I'm really not trying to, because like I said, there are hints of something really cool in here, but like I said, there's no soul. I don't feel attached to my dudes or particularly invested, and I found when I was going for the umpteenth fight, just to try and get enough money to actually buy something for my team and evolve it in some way, I was kind of bored. I was zoning out. I was having these fights and just thinking, I wasn't thinking anything, you know? And it's such a shame. Anyway, that's my point there. If you've made it this far, I hope I haven't offended you. People get very upset when you say things that they don't want to hear. What I will say is, like, I'm a big fan of introspection. You got to look inward. There's no point of holding a position and never challenging it, right? I'm totally open to being wrong. Mechanically, this has some really cool things going on here, right? So, like, if you laid it out on paper and unpacked all the bits and bobs, it should be solid. But then in the translation, there's an issue. And so I recognize that, and recognize that in this particular case, it could be me. It could be that for whatever reason, the aesthetic is not hitting it, and where I see bland, someone else might see fantastic, and they might absolutely love it. So it's on the back of that I put this game up. I've raised my issues because I don't want to just go and say, hey, this game's great, and then have people go, no, it's not. I want to be really honest about my perspective, but also say that I'm willing to understand that maybe I'm skewed, maybe I don't get it, but maybe you would. So if you've got the change lying around and you're looking for another XCOM type game right now, and some of this appeals to you, give it a go. It might just be that you actually really personally enjoy it where I didn't, and I'd be curious to hear if anyone finds that this has soul where I found that it really didn't. Anyway, look, it's a hard thing. It's a hard thing to say that, especially when it's one of my favorite genres, and there's some cool things going on here. But what can I say, guys? I'm honest, if nothing else. It's a little bit lukewarm for me, but check it out if you're into these sort of things, and maybe you have more of an affinity for, say, the post-apocalyptic gas mask sort of thing than maybe I do. So, guys, if you like what I do here on the channel, which is to say signal boosting indies and bringing you games that you might not have heard of and they might not have made it onto your radar, then if you wanted to, chuck me a like or a comment, feedback's always well received. I love to see that. Or even subscribe if you're not really part of the channel yet. That'd be really appreciated if you did those things. If you want to take it one step further, you can always join up for $1 a month as a member. But again, I'm only really saying this stuff because you made it this far to the end of the video, so maybe you're interested in that sort of stuff too. Team, thanks again for joining me. We might just leave it there for the time being, and I will catch you guys on the next one.